Last year, with the abnormal amount of precipitation the state received, there were a lot of increasing concerns about, disease in the state that led to different applications of different fungicides. And of course, when you're not rotating the modes of action for these fungicides, resistance can be created. Um, so I'm just curious, from your perspective, what impact really does fungicide resistance have on some of our, tree nut and grape crops here in California?
Well, that's a good question. It's something that I spend a lot of time educating people on. And the first thing that I usually kind of reference is what what is the reason for using a fungicide? And we're using a fungicide to control a disease. So whenever we use that fungicide, we want it to be as efficacious as possible. So we select the fungicide that will be effective and control the disease and keep the disease from causing too much of an issue and losing production. So that's kind of the basic that I always go back to. And obviously going from one mode of action from a fungicide to another is an extremely important process in doing this successfully.
Certainly. And that rotating modes of action, or rather lack thereof, seems to be the primary cause of fungicide resistance. Can you expand on that more, and maybe any other smaller ways that fungicide resistance can be created?
Absolutely. So, I mean, resistance in general, regardless if it's a, fungicide, herbicide, insecticide, is something that probably should keep most PCAs up at night because it's the tools that we have to battle the pests that we're going against. And typically, we've seen it in various cases where something we are used to using and it's being effective, and then one day it stops being effective. Um, Things like maybe picking lower rates might lead to resistance. Things like targeting the wrong pest with the wrong fungicide. So treating for a disease that's not covered by the fungicide you're using. And repeated use leads to resistance. So it's something that education is extremely important, and knowing what fungicides you are using versus what disease and knowing what the labeled rates are. It's something all factors have to be considered in order for it to be effective.
Certainly, good point there. And I understand, another thing you want to be in the know of is also what your neighbors are doing in this regard. Like a lot of different things in agriculture, sometimes what your neighbors are doing, especially in the pest and disease world, can affect what you're doing in your own field or orchard. So how can working with your neighbors, Bryce, kind of help stop the spread of these fungicide resistances?
Absolutely. So knowing what diseases are present, in your given area and making timely treatments for those diseases will help the overall pressure get reduced. So, if you are treating for disease in your orchard or your vineyard and your neighbor is not, that becomes an issue later. And then just knowing, what products might they be using and what products are you using and making sure that you're making the right choices.